the resident curator here. So this morning I was thinking about how this exhibition was well received here, that it sort of necessitated an extension, and how I learn more about Peter every day, or in the period this exhibition is here. I've learned so much about him. So, and I was telling him that I'm willing to sort of do a scholarly work of some sort on him as a mentor, or as my mentor. And I think it might be something that I do with other mentors that have mentored me, who are maybe his contemporaries. Because I think mentors of his generation, or senior artists like him who mentored me, sort of shaped me into the creative worker I am today. And that includes David Kolwani, Judith Mason, and Sam Kemgeto. So we are facing a very difficult challenge, and I'm also challenging this back to you, to say, with the exception of very few black artists, we do not have literature on many black artists. And how do we explain it to the next generation to say there existed John Moore? And they ask, how can I know of him? And maybe there is no book on him. So I'll do something about it as a tribute to him, and maybe a scholarly lens through Chipapi's curatorial look at Peter Clarke's work. It's something that is also possible. And thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. That's actually something that was very important for us in the culture as well. It's saying, when we do engage this exhibition, we want the visual and the literary to be in dialogue consistently. And I think when we look at artists like Peter Clarke, he was very much for that. He had an understanding of how literature informs how he shows up in the world, informs how he observes. And he spoke a lot about his stance and him as an observer. But before that, I just want to read his reflections, very short blurb off of the page, responding to how he was approached for this work to be put together. It says, when Elizabeth Rankin and Philippa Hobbs contacted me and broached the topic of writing a book about my career as an artist in South Africa, I must admit I was delighted. Naturally, it appealed to my ego. Wouldn't a project like this appeal to anybody's ego? Besides, a book about me at this stage of my life makes a lot of sense. It is said that people always say nice things about you when you're dead. I agree to the writing of this book because I'm curious as to what is going to be said about me while I'm still alive. Also, I felt there might be some things I need to say myself in order to set the record straight. When I was a child, I used to wonder about space and time and the beating of my heart. I used to wonder about space and time and the beating of my heart. I used to wonder about life and death and what it would be like to be invisible. I wondered and still wonder about a variety of things. For instance, now at 81 years of age, the child in me is still awed by the sound of distant thunder. I think just hearing that makes me want to say to you, especially after what you just experienced, I'm pretty sure you would have been chuffed to hear how you speak about him, even though he's not alive in the present right now. Let's reflect on this man and his childlike spirit, because I find that there's a sense of being childlike and how he still remembers the things that, I guess, ground him and keep him human, and then what that does to the artist.
Very interesting. The last part of the reflection,
it is what really makes me think hard about what do we do as cultural workers about making art accessible in our immediate communities. Because the last part, he meets a young boy who grew up in front of him and now is like at least an older boy or a man. And he eavesdropped their conversation. This young man is saying, look at him. They greeted him, and as he walks away, he tells the boy, the guys who are with him, to say, this is our poet. And he says it in Afrikaans.
Guys on the artist.
Yeah.
Yes, walk on the poet.
Yes. So I think, and it's something that I'm doing. I grew up in Polokwane, in the village Makotopo. I've been having exhibitions around Joburg, Cape Town, and even outside South Africa. And what thought struck me? What are you doing for the community that brought you up? Are you okay when they see you on TV talking about art? Are you okay when they read about you and blah, 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 blah? Is that fine? I said, no, it's not fine. So I spoke to the Polokwane Art Museum, and we mounted my mid-career retrospective exhibition that spans 16 years of my studio practice. That included works from 18 other exhibitions. So I'm saying this so that cultural workers that are here, we must be proud of our work and tell not only our family, teach our immediate communities about our work. That way we'll be building up arts appreciation or cultural work appreciation by our people. So I think we must not tire to talk about art. Whenever they give me a mic, I'm going to talk about art. Even if I'm in a funeral. Because I want people to know about art. So yeah, I think you are very kind to think that he will be smiling how I spoke about him and his work. But maybe it's because of what he taught me and what I learned from him as a person, acknowledging other creators. Because he was not, he is one person who was comfortable in being himself and not intimidated by the success of other fellow artists. And in the book, there's somewhere where he was so upset that the journalist wrote something that money is rolling in for a colored artist in Cape Town.
Yeah.
He didn't like that. So, but we understand journalists sometimes they exaggerate when it comes to headlines. They once said that I'm taking Joburg art by the storm. Like something along those lines.
And that is bad because
I mean, I think it's just exaggeration. Because like, how do you take the art scene in Joburg like the storm?
if anything,
But I mean, when we were studying journalism, they say if it bleeds, it leads. So it was good for the exhibition. People talked about it and they went to see how am I taking Joburg by the storm. So, but I'm saying that he was that kind of person. It didn't sit well with him because he's humble.
Yeah.
He's still with the people and he's still for the people.
humble to a fault. I want us to go back to that metaphorical expression of thorns and definitely reflect on where we are. But I also think what I found interesting was that in the early stages of his life as a boy, I found it crazy that he found the classroom to be confining. It wasn't a conducive environment for him, number one. Number two, he found landscapes to be his classroom. as an observer, as he's out there, he felt more alive. At least that's what I could deduce from the book. And even the art, actually, it kind of shows you where he was and how he was able to express himself. And then fast forward to him, older, grown, he can see kids who are going to school, he can see his thorns, and he knows there's injustice there. Humble as he was, there's a level of certainty in his voice. There was something that was just so unshakable about the things that he felt strongly about. And then lastly, I would need to get your reflections on how he depicts injustice. I look at the faces, for example. There's something strange about how hopeful they are, even in the midst of all of these challenges that they're going through. Walking through those thorns, you can see those kids, it seems like they're walking forward, they're forging forward. Let's talk about these thorns and reflect back to where we are.
I think it's quite interesting for artists and a child who's an artist or who has artists in them to find education of the classroom very restricting and I wouldn't say oppressive because it will just be a very big word, but that's how he experienced. And I think it does happen with like kids who are creative. Because when you're an artist, I was told you have 3 eyes. You have a third eye and a third ear. So you see that which is not visible to an ordinary. So the reason why he was not really fascinated by being in the classroom, it is also later explained by how he quitted the job to focus on this craft, this calling, this talent, this thing that gives him life. So, and he does understand that there are thorns in the society, there are challenges, but he uses metaphorical means, which is thorn, to speak to those challenges. Unlike maybe politicians will use another way of talking about those challenges. But how he speaks of the challenges, it's on your face, and it's there, and you will be there for a long time. As opposed to having said something at a rally that is fleeting. It's just a sound bite. It has sort of a shelf life unless it is excavated at some point. So he believed in education. He believed that we should be educated. And I think in the letter that he sent me, he emphasized, after reading that review, he said it's important for the artist to also pursue scholarly work or writing about art. Because he understood that if you have an artist who writes about art and you have somebody who writes about they are not artists, there's a difference in that. Because artists, at least, they understand the techniques, they know the techniques, they've tested them. So you're speaking from a wholesome lived experience. So yeah, I think the challenge they remain. That's why the opening speaker spoke about those challenges that Peter Clark saw in 1962, conceived the idea of the thorns of this challenge to education, but only found expression later in 2008 into that particular piece, giving it expression many years later. Then it means that he stayed with this challenge for a long time, because it's a challenge that maybe does not give him sleepful nights. So I think those challenges that he spoke about are still relevant. And I think that's why we have this exhibition, to revisit some of these ideas around education and those challenges. So yeah.
I want to say we Yeah. So everything that you have mentioned about moving from the 50s, the 60s, going into the 2000s and, it's laid out so beautifully here. And his personality comes out quite strongly because of those interviews that were carried out about what he thought about the things that were happening around the time where the art was conceived. But let's talk about space, because it's a very consistent theme. And I think I see it here as well, in terms of how it affects, maybe we say influence as opposed to affects, his ability to move around, with mobility, space, and then art making, right? In the early stages, it's you're in Simonstown, obviously you know the kind of household you live in, you live with your people, you don't have a lot of space and the luxury of space to create art and take up a whole room, for example. People have to share space. What does that do for you? And then to me, as a lover of jazz music as well, immediately I thought about improvisation when I look at how he was able to make do with what we had. But it didn't seem like it felt like something that would hold him back because of his commitment to the work. And then I want to bring us back to your choice in terms of how you curated this exhibition and where that special insight came in the decisions that you had to make.
Okay, cool. Let me start with the question of space. He knew what he wanted, and he knew very well what he wanted to do. And he had an inclination and understanding of how he's going to do it. So the improvisation that you're speaking about in jazz, in music, he did not allow the space or lack thereof to stop him from being an artist that he came out to be. And it's something that, as I read about him, I say, in fact, people find excuses sometimes of justifying why they are not doing what they're supposed to do. And in the case of him living with his people in a household that maybe doesn't have enough space, maybe he makes sure that he paints when people go to sleep. In the kitchen, just his easel, canvas, or whatever, or on the table, and produce. Because also he believed that by producing, these have the potential, actually he's investing in this thing that he must do consistently. And I suppose when he quitted the job, it was because he was already selling his artworks. Remember, the first work that he sold, he was 16 years. Then by the time he quitted the job at the dockyard, he was 24. So it must tell you that it's something that he's been investing on as a means to maybe establish himself. And maybe let me bring this closer to me. My first solo exhibition was produced in one room that I stayed in 2013. I didn't say, no, I don't have a studio, so I cannot work towards a solo exhibition. Because I need to unpack and understand, what does solo exhibition mean to me? And it meant that a presentation of artworks by myself, by me only. So how do I do it when I don't have a studio? I closed the door, I taped a full sheet, started painting and drawing. So I produced about 13 pieces. I went to, because commercial galleries, they can't just take you on as an artist, an unknown artist. So I then approached Johannesburg City Library and said, I would like to have an exhibition here. Then the librarian in the art section I think maybe saw the fire in me, that I want this thing. And he said, do you have wax? I said, yeah, I do have wax. He said, bring them on. The following week, I went there, I presented my work. He was happy. He said, this work, we're going to exhibit them here. But what about that space? Do you have more wax? I said, no, I don't have more wax, but I will create them. Went to behind that door of my room, which is a communal house. Maybe 5 people are staying in this house. They have their own rooms. I produced more wax, and I produced my first and my second solo exhibition in that room. So I think the concept of space can be an excuse if you don't want to do what you know you must do. You just find the space as an excuse not to do. So the question of how I curated the exhibition. Of course, spaces change the presentation of works. So how we have displayed this piece here, the pieces here, is not the same as we presented this very exhibition at Springside Gallery and at the Mampisat Gallery. It differs. So for me, I listen to the space. And some people may say, but how can you listen to the space? So how I do my exhibitions, I allow my intuition to help me facilitate the layout and to finally put up the exhibition. So in this case, we put all the works around, and I walked to each one of them and listened to the work if the work wants to be there. Of course, there were adjustments here and there to say, yes, I know you, this work you want to be here, but I'm going to not put you here.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of intuition and perhaps allowing the works to tell you how they want to be displayed. But also, I took the idea of a timeline of the works being created, the years. When you look at this first section, there are the works between 1950 and 1960. Then, with the exception with the works that the UNISA Gallery have them in their holdings, they then occupied their own specific space. But that particular acrylic oil, because it's the only acrylic oil in the exhibition, had to occupy a certain spot that speaks to its being unique in terms of it's the only oil on canvas. So yeah, I think the long shot to your answer is that I listen to my intuition as I curate, but I also allow the works, because I treat artworks with absolute care, because artworks have a soul. So I sort of listen to these artworks as they talk to me, and I sort of, we do have quarrels here and there to challenge, to say, it's not gonna work, can I do this? Can you just give me a chance to curate?
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some of the methods that I use in terms of the layout.
And it's interesting because when you track his life story and then even just the layout itself, I found it interesting that some of the artworks were in conversation right across from each other. The one responded to the other. And I guess for me as well, having had the privilege to read about what was going on, you could sort of see the growth as well, even in just the technique and how he was developing as an artist. Now, there's another, we're going to open it up to Q&A just now. I'm getting to the end of our conversation. I want us to talk about the gallery space. Yesterday I read that one of the people who had an encounter with Itadoku Pizza Club passed. I think it was the Vagalisa cooperative that they had put together, where it was, I guess, artists getting together as a collective, fighting the good fight, making sure that they sustain themselves in the Western Cape, especially the injustices that they were facing at the time. And there's a picture in one of the books, I'm not sure which one yet, but Baba Patrick Olo is there as well. And then I hear that he is no more. And I'm just thinking about how it feels like life is poetry. So when you started with the artwork that side, and it's like the last one, close the lid, and then you asked him, how do you want to be remembered? I would be gone.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be there.
I'm not gonna be there.
It wouldn't matter.
But it absolutely matters that the conversation is happening right here, right now. So let's talk about the legacy of the art world in South Africa. And I want us to really take a moment to think about this, because he was very big on acknowledging people. And I think it's also because there were people who were involved in his success, getting opportunities, feeling like he had a community of people, friends that he could rely on, writing in community, creating artworks. I will say though, it was a bit comical for me when he spoke about how he struggled with collages in the beginning. That alone shows his character, that he's not afraid to say, I'm new at this and I'm going to start and learn how it goes. Perhaps then that's why he gets to be so multidisciplinary. But let's talk about the gallery space as a holder of space for artists. Let's talk about advancing the conversation with artists as a collective and as individuals. What are we supposed to do as cultural workers, as cultural critiques, as writers, and so many other artistic forms of expression that sort of act as custodians for art and what happens? Let's reflect on the status quo and the direction we should be in.
Yeah, the question is too big for me, because it's sort of putting a spotlight to speak for the artist, which is impossible to do. I'll speak from how I see what must be done.
Yes.
The exhibition in Polokwane, it's still on, it was extended. And I saw young people from TikTok coming into the space, taking reels of my work, sharing them on their social media, without acknowledging me as the artist, the museum, the curators. And it challenged me to say, Chipak, are you then mad at them for this? You know, I stood there, I said, maybe they don't know that they should do that.
Yes.
Maybe they don't know the way of going about it. Perhaps it's an opportunity for me to teach them. And I was right in my conviction that I should not be mad at them. You know, I was like working at a call center. So you see this, then you start to follow them, or you comment to say, kindly acknowledge the artist. And they come back and they say, oh, we apologize, and. So what do we do as cultural workers to make art accessible, but also to say, those who have access to art, when they share art, what is it that they must do? That post, the first post brought entourage of TikTokers of the same generation of that first person who shared. So it was trendy kind of thing that they had to go to the museum. It increased I only focus on the positives. It increased the footprint for the museum. It also increased maybe the visibility of my work. So I understand there's a question of authorship there to say if you are going to pose with Chipapi's work in the background, and when you post, you just say, because there was this funny post, she said, art, peace, love. That was the caption.
Art, peace, love.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, and I'm saying like, there's no peace and love, and these are my works in the background. So I then got to say, okay, I need to calm down and say, please give the artist credit of the work that appears in your background, because it's the normal standard practiced in the museum. And they've learned, man. I mean, we are not friends.
So, know better.
Yeah. So this is what we can do as cultural workers, but this is also what people who are not cultural workers who support us, they can do. When they come to exhibitions, if they're gonna post it anywhere, WhatsApp, TikTok, or wherever, acknowledge the work in the background. Acknowledge the artist, the curator, and the museum. At least that way, you make people who see your work not to see love, peace, and
out. Love, peace, out.
At least they see, oh, this exhibition, this is the title. Oh, where is it? It's at Polokwane Museum. Who curated? These are the curators. Who's the artist? These are the artists. What is the artwork? This is the title of the artwork. That is something that we must consistently and patiently do. Because we see a huge number of people going to art fairs. Yes, there is a provision where they have these earphones where someone is walking them apart.
Yeah.
But we still have to do a lot of work to teach them. Yes, you buy the ticket. Yes, you enter the fair. But take note, if there is one piece or two pieces that you love and you're going to take a picture of, look at the caption. When you share it with that caption. So, another thing is that I'm an art collector myself. And I started collecting in 2009. I didn't have money to collect. So what I did, I'll talk to artists who cannot write their artist statement. To say, I'm going to help you write your artist statement in exchange of an artwork. So, and I did that. So it was sort of a battalion. And I'm extending this to our friends today here to say, if you are a lawyer, there is a particular artist you love his work or her work, strike a deal with them. Say, you know what, I love your work, I'm a lawyer, can't afford it. Can I help you with the legal work in exchange of artwork? But that will depend on how you agree. But I tend to not see the artwork in the value of how I will sell it when you are bringing in the service.
Yeah.
Maybe you're doing my PR, I don't have money to pay you. You say, okay, if you work for me for this period, this is what I will pay you. So that is what we can do. But also we must make it our everyday thing to go to art museums, art galleries, libraries, and theaters, and jazz concerts or music concerts. Because artists need our support. And by supporting them, we are giving them hope that what they are doing is a correct thing to do. So continue with that kind of support. I don't know if I answered all your questions.
You answered all of my questions. I don't know if anybody else has some questions. Okay, I'm going to. Should we take all the questions and then answer, or you take
I'm
one?
going to forget some.
Okay, fantastic.
question.
I have a lot to say. But I'll try to keep it brief. My name is Iwo Wanashibai, also from Limpopo. I was drawn to this exhibition primarily because of the theme, and I think when I saw the poster, I began formulating my own theories about it, purely because what I do like to see things. And when I came here, I was very glad that I didn't have to defend my imaginary pieces because, yeah, it's the artist built on what I had formulated technically aligned. When we were doing the walkabout, I did try, we were not able to ask the questions there and there, and I think it would have, yeah, it definitely would have stopped the program. But I did try to just make notes and comments on some of the things, that I picked up. I don't know who Peter Clark was 65 minutes ago, and it's not Peter Clark that brought me to this exhibition, like I said, but I did learn a lot based on this curation and also what you showcased. And I think he was very dedicated. I think when you spoke about the wood color reduction and how difficult it is, I am instinctively inclined to just believe anyone that does things that are difficult, right? And I think it just shows dedication, because you mentioned that just one mistake messes up the entire artwork, right? I think I picked up for fullness as well, based on the Amsterdam piece. We didn't have televisions in South Africa, and he saw that and was like, wow, I have to go show people back at home. And he drew a painting of that. So that was incredible. I think tragedies in the seas, for me, that says that this is someone that cares not only just about people, but also the environment in itself. And then we moved over to that piece over there, and something in me kind of just ticked, right? I was a bit vexed a little bit, particularly about John Moore, because when you said, I was looking at it and I was like, John Moore, but then you also said, Koinake, and I was like, how? Koinake with the wall selling, very interesting, and then you took us through that entire story, and it got me thinking about how John was like a victim of cultural imperialism, right? And your name is your name, right? Your name is your name, whether it's difficult or it's not. It carries a lot of history and identity, specifically for us African people. And I'm just wondering how many more artists whose names were not remembered or documented due to cultural imperialism, right? By just powers at the time that determined which identities were kept or adapted or just completely erased. And I think it also spans across literature as well, right? We've all adapted so much to European language. I think in schools also right now, English is like a first additional language, right? Which I think for me is okay, because it gives us the ability to engage on a global scale. But I'm just wondering, because we're speaking so much of, actually speaking English, we're using European languages so much as Black people, are there words that are being erased from our everyday vocabulary? And how do you think we can preserve that? Because I think there's like words that we're using right now, just in different cultures, and I'm worried that 50 years to come, those words will not exist. And this is stemming from, I grew up in Soweto, and someone said a word, Uchaka, which means to hide something. And I thought, wow, I haven't heard that in a long time. And it got me thinking about just culturally, the words that are being spoken now. How do you think, we can preserve, those words?
Great. The last part of your your remarks. It's sort of a question. To answer you, you seem very engaged with the exhibition, which is a good thing. I'm going to challenge you to write a review in Chivenda as a way of culturally preserving this knowledge that is in this exhibition in your language, as your name is Ndivugo. So we must do our best to preserve our languages. I introduce myself with a family recitation, clan poetry in Sepedi or Sibiro. So that is my bit of that cultural preservation. But each time I make sure that I go to FM and I speak purely in Sepedi. I do my research. I'm not gonna go there and say, I don't know what this word is called in Sepedi. I'm going to pedify that. So, and that's I think we all need to be language activists. Yes, we acknowledge English but we need to be aware that a language that is not spoken ceases to exist. So we must not be accomplice to the dying of our languages. So we must try to pause and think with our languages. Yes, we can know English and stuff like that, can help us to talk to people outside South Africa or people who don't know Sepedi. But it's important to culturally preserve what is left of our culture, which includes the language. And I think the opening of, as much as it's a long sort of recitation of the clan poetry, it's something, it's an inheritance of oral history tradition that I still am proud of. And it's something that I need to teach maybe the next generation. And I encourage everyone to go and just find out maybe three to four generations back of who you are. You know, it's not a very difficult thing to do, but also it helps you to ground you to say, to know who you are. Because I cannot be proud to know about Peter Clark if I don't know who's my great-great-grandfather. Yeah, I think I answered you. But thank you so much for engaging with it. Please write the review in Chivenda and send it to the UNISA people and our gallery. We'll be happy to post it on our socials and our website, because it also makes people who read in Chivenda to access what we have discussed today and your interpretation of that which is put before you. And the literature part, deliberately this section is dedicated to Peter Clark's literature. And I'm glad that the bookstores are this side, because you look at the letters, you look at the works that he inscribed text, and you look at this TV here, it has his quotes. There is this slide presentation that has his quotes that seeks to really think of him as a thinker and philosopher, so that you guys can quote him in your speeches at some point when you talk. Next question.
Hi, thank you so much for a really nice tour of the exhibition. I need to make a disclaimer, or a couple of them, because the way I might ask the question might be a little bit weird. Okay, so firstly, I'm not an art person, I'm a science person. And secondly, I studied at South Africa actually, which is nice.
That's good.
Thirdly, I'm from Northern Cape.
Great.
So, the way I'm going to ask this question is this. I like education a lot, and that's because I like to learn, that's why I'm here. And like her, I came because of the topic at hand, thoughts in education and how possibly they will impact our lives. So now, I'm going to bite a little bit of a piece of what you said, at a particular art piece. You mentioned that today's new artists do not somehow create or engage with the previous generation of artists, not particularly per se, but not so much like Peter Fab did. I wanted to ask that, do you think that dates back to education? Is it due to the fact that, for example, in Cape there isn't many art galleries or even libraries that could accommodate artists? So my question comes to this now. Do you think artists of today not acknowledging artists of the previous days due to lack of education and them not exposing themselves enough to the history of what they are currently working on? And the second one is, how could you possibly, or rather as artists, I assume there's a lot of them in this room, how do you as artists want to bridge the gap between what people see as art and how they also perceive it? Considering that another point in your case was some people take a picture of an art piece that they like and they post it on social media and they won't credit the artist. Do you think also that is due to them not knowing how to read the labels of that particular art piece? I know how to do it because I visited many art galleries, William galleries as well, being one of them. And so it's quite easy for me, but normal people they don't know. So how do you ensure, or rather create the space in the art galleries to ensure that as soon as a person enters, they pretty much know which information is where in that sense? So I assume that you guys have 3 questions.
Cool. Your questions were they were long. I might have forgotten some parts, but I think Northern Cape or Kimberley is one of the few richly endowed cities with various museums. Because in the city alone, we have about 5 museums. It could be the question of people not knowing about them. But what are the museums doing to reach out? And we've been on a mission of making William Humphrey accessible to everyone. And we've sort of increased the number of people to the museum from Halishini and the city itself. But we did it the traditional way by giving people pamphlets and still using posters. Moses Senior, so can you stand up because I didn't acknowledge that I'm not here alone, I'm with Moses. So Moses still takes posters to different places so people can know, including SPU. You might have seen some of our posters at SPU during your time. So I think the museums have a role to play also in supporting the artists. And the artists also need to be able to take the opportunity and be teachable. Yes, when you look at the artworks, they have captions that help you, guide you to enter into the artwork. But what we hope to do is that when we have curatorial statements like the one that you spoke about, we also have to have them written in Afrikaans and Setswana, especially in Kimberley. And here we could also have it written in Sipitori, so that people and Chivenda and Chitsonga and Sepedi, so that people have no excuse why maybe they don't understand a certain exhibition. That way it will create also employment. Somebody will be employed to strictly look at text in Setswana or Sepedi or Chivenda and other languages. So artists not acknowledging other artists. I'm sorry if I sounded like I'm generalizing, but it was an experience of some artists I've encountered, especially young artists that I mentor. But also maybe in schools, we learn more about European artists than we do about African artists. And most of the artists that I know of African descent, it was because of going to exhibitions, galleries, and reading art books. Because in the syllabus, they're still not there. Does that answer your question? So, one last thing is that what we do at William Humphrey in support of artists. Biannually, we have Northern Cape Artist Exhibition. So we open the call to everyone, every artist from Northern Cape in Northern Cape. And we select the works and we display their works. And we have a week where we invite professional artists to come and do different presentations and workshops to them on how to navigate this profession of the visual arts. And that's the little we could go, but we keep on trying with the very limited resources that we have. I trust I answered your questions. Thank you.
Is it afternoon? I don't have the time. I hope it is afternoon. Igama nguSindiso Nhlabati. I am a journalist, so don't shoot me. I'm from the Gauteng network. It was interesting when you mentioned the issues of the storm and so. It's something I'm realizing recently. A few of my friends who are in the creative space have started sending me communique on their works, hoping that I'll somehow help them get it into the publications and so forth. And it's mainly the fault of one of my other friends. I helped out in Mpumalanga, and I sort of did the press. Why am I speaking in that is back to what you said about writing about the work and acknowledging the artist, the museum, and so forth, which is something I personally have beef with influencers, particularly.
I saw your
You find I did an entire article. They'll take snippets of it and butcher it and give like this very irritating shock element of it. And I don't know, I'm always in the comments like yourself, trying to say, you sourced this from here. Please give details and acknowledge.
Yeah.
And it's an irritating part of what is going on right now. So I would like how do we expand that? Educate, because some of these kids are pretty much people with a phone and they just do their thing. It's good, but I want that particular element of acknowledgement. The other part is, how do we create a space? Publications have got online. If you would notice publications now, the cultural and entertainment part for journalists is no longer existent. If it's not political, economics, sports, nothing of the culture, unless something major happens, maybe an artist dies, you'll see an article. Unless an artist loses everything they have, you'll see an article in the tabloids. Nothing to try and invest and try to tell these stories of these particular showcases and so forth. And it's really hurting me because I feel that cultural journalists and entertainment journalists are an essential part for the sector to be self-sustained.
It's difficult. And thank you for the work that you're doing, for covering the arts, culture, and entertainment. It's a very important work to do, and I would encourage you to continue to do it, even if it means that you're going to put it on your own platforms. So, I always argue with people in the Department of Arts. I also work for TISA. But I'm saying, if we think that arts culture is important, and we still don't have a dedicated slot, hourly slot like sports update and so if we don't have those dedicated hourly slots, daily shows on arts and culture,
Yeah.
our hope for the arts and culture appreciation in South Africa will continue to dwindle. So I'm challenging you to say, with the work that you do, why don't you approach a local, regional, and even national radio station to give updates on the arts? I'm gonna tell you why I'm saying this. I know they're not gonna pay, or they may not pay. I've done this on a radio station for 2 years. They don't pay. Sometimes they say you need to pay us because we're giving you more airtime.
Yeah.
But we need to make it normal that talking about the arts and culture in our lifetime, and I'm sorry to sound like a politician, it's important. And we cannot see an increased foot traffic into our museums, galleries, and theaters until we have that kind of dedicated show. I'm not saying Saturday show where we just talk about the arts or like a very short sort of 1 hour. No, I'm saying we as cultural workers, we need to push the powers that be, the DSEC, if for example, it needs to represent all of us in the department, to say we have sports on every radio show. We have sports update on every radio show. Why don't we have arts and culture update?
Yeah.
And perhaps they may explain why. Then we'll decide if it makes sense or it doesn't, or if it requires us to keep on pushing. But I will encourage you to push that, and everyone to say in our spaces, let's talk about arts and culture. Let's make sure that it finds expression on our radio stations and our television. It shouldn't be a feature here when every news bulletin on SABC, for example, or any other channel, they have sports update. We must demand arts and cultural update. Thank you. I hope I answered.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our session. Thank you so much. Firstly, thank you to the William Humphreys Art Gallery, to the UNISA Art Gallery, to you for coming here this morning and for engaging the exhibition and Chipape so beautifully. I think one of the things that I really would like us to take home is the fact that he wasn't just an artist, he was an avid reader. He read Fanon, he read Cabral, and he lived off the words, those who know should teach those who don't. This applies to us as individuals in our work, at exhibitions, at museums, and galleries. Those who know should teach those who don't. Please do hang around, take, again, a bit of a browse, and we've got books for sale. If you're interested in this title, it's available for sale right now, and there's other very interesting titles that you can browse, brought to you by Viticulture. This is a thing, so please keep it glued to UNISA Art Gallery. We love gathering here and having these conversations that are enriching. A round of applause to you again for being such a Thank you so much. There's refreshments, right? There's refreshments as well. Please do meet people, mingle. Thank you so much again.
Can we just give her a round of applause? Thank you so much. Keep up the good work. Any work that seeks to amplify the work that we cultural workers do, we appreciate. And keep up the good work. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.